Call to order the 3 May 2023 Planning Commission meeting, regular meeting. Mr. Holt.
Mr. Rogers.
Present.
Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Knoll, who represents the Stonehouse District, could not be with us this evening. Mr. Rose.
Present.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District and is vice chair to the commission. Mr. Haldeman.
Present.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is also an at-large member. Mr. Kropp.
Here.
Mr. Kropp represents the Powhatan District. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is chair of the Commission on Powell Holt Community Development and Planning Director for the county, and it's my pleasure to serve as secretary to the commission. Sitting to my left this evening is Ms. Liz Parman, our deputy county attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. The first item on our agenda is the public comment period, and these are topics that are not going to be subject to a public hearing tonight. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not for that evening.
Let me open and close unless there's anybody that wishes to speak on any item. Okay, I'll close the public comment. The second or the third item on our agenda is the reports of the commission. Mr. Rogers from the DRC.
Thank you. The Development Review Committee met at 4 p.m. on April 19 of 2023. The committee members present were myself, Steve Rogers, chair, Rob Rose, Barbara Knoll, and Frank Polster. We had some staff members present, Thomas Wysong and Armani Franklin, the community development assistant. Our committee discussed C-TAC 23, TAC 0013, which involved 3150 Jolly Pond Road Subdivision, a shared driveway exception request, which had been continued from our March 29, 2023 meeting. The plan proposes a shared driveway exception to Section 19 TAC 73 of the James City County Subdivision Ordinance, and it seeks to permit direct access onto Jolly Pond Road for an approved 5-lot subdivision, which involves 3148, 3158, 3140, 3120, and 3154 Jolly Pond Road. It would allow access through an existing frontage by removing the need for an existing shared 25-foot ingress and egress easement and any notes prohibiting access to Jolly Pond Road for each of those lots. So summarizing what happened here at the meeting, these plats, they were originally created as part of a family subdivision with an intended access road which would run parallel to Jolly Pond Road, whereby the 5 driveways would access the easement road, and that itself would have just one direct access, entrance, and egress onto Jolly Pond Road. The family subdivision, however, was not built, and subsequently those lots were sold and are now owned by a number of unrelated parties, each of which pursued their own plans along with the county, and each intends to build a residence on their lot. As various site plans and permits were presented and approved by the county, the single access easement road disappeared from discussions and also from the various site plans. This resulted in septic fields being situated beneath what we now know to have been the proposed access road. At this point, compliance with the originally proposed 25-foot ingress-egress easement would result in overly complicated driveway layouts, and in at least one situation, the garage of a newly built and constructed house is on the wrong side of the house. But more importantly, heavy vehicles would now be traveling upon the actual septic fields as they enter and leave the subdivision. Representatives from VDOT visited the site and they met with the property owners. They reviewed the newly proposed driveways and they have now withdrawn what was an earlier voiced objection to the construction. The entrances are already in place and being used for lots 1, 2, 3, and 4. With the exception of Lot 5, all necessary access entrances are operating. And the final lot, Lot 5, will tie into an existing shared driveway. The committee and the applicant team discussed the newly proposed plan, which allowed for the least amount of access to Jolly Pound Road, but still permitted development on the parcels as approved and as cited. And the exhibit provided 4 driveways instead of the originally proposed 5 was now displayed. A motion was made to recommend approval of this exception with the condition that the exception request must match this newer exhibit provided, and the motion passed by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. I stood in for Mr. Haldeman for the Policy Committee meeting on 13 April. Policy Committee met on 13 April. Committee members attending were Mr. O'Connor, Mr. Kraft, and Mr. Polster. Staff present were Thomas Wysong, Senior Planner, Jose Ribeiro, Senior Landscape Planner, John Reisinger, Senior Planner, Ellen Cook, Senior Planner, John Crump, Principal Planner, and Andre Case, Planner. At its 24 January 2023 meeting, the Board of Supervisors provided the following guidance to the planning staff and the Policy Committee. 1. Prepare an analysis of the 400-foot setback proposed of Old Stage Road and Forge Road with a proposed setback of 200 feet for the parcels 500 feet deep or less, shallow parcels, to examine the number of non-structures that would become non-conforming. 2. Examine whether a family subdivision could be exempt from the 400-foot or 200-foot proposed setback. 3. Consider the possibility of an overlay district, a county-initiated rezoning, instead of or in addition to a zoning text amendment. The staff report indicated that different setbacks for family subdivision was not recommended. At its April 13th meeting, the Policy Committee recommended that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of Supervisors to approve the buffering requirements along the wooded community corridors. On the other 2 items, the 400-foot and 200-foot setbacks on Old Stage Road and Forge Road and the overlay district, the Policy Committee deferred a decision on these items. It requested staff examine an alternative position with a setback approach based on the building height for the 2 agriculture community corridors, Old Stage and Forge Road. Just as a note, you may have received an email from Mr. Wysong on this issue that lays out all of the options that we requested from the Policy Committee on the 13th of April. And in fact, we're going to pull that item. I will pull that item for discussion when we get to the Planning Commission discussions and reports at that portion of our agenda. And that's it for me. All right, on to the next piece is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are deemed to be non-controversial. Does anyone like to pull an agenda item?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request we pull the Development Review Committee item C23-0013 for further discussion.
Okay, we'll pull that one. Are there any other items on the minutes? Or should we do a vote on that one?
We can do a voice vote on the minutes.
All right, so we have a voice vote on the minutes, please?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so now, do we have somebody from staff to talk about that?
We're gonna show the proposed number of driveways there. You know, I can try and answer questions as you'd like. We didn't really have a formal presentation planned. I know some of you have heard some of these details previously, as you mentioned over, or as Mr. Rogers mentioned, over 2 different DRC meetings. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them or turn them over to you all for dialogue.
I do have a question, just to follow the trail. How did we get from a proposed 5-lot family subdivision with that 25-foot in and out access road to a situation where 5 individuals purchased their lots and nobody, that egress and ingress road never showed up anywhere? And so from what I'm gathering, there's septic fields that now are in place under what would have been the 25-foot road. How did this happen?
So it's not a family subdivision, it's a minor subdivision, and as you know, the subdivision ordinance for vacant lots of 3 lots or more requires that each lot be served by a shared driveway All of that is what was approved as part of the minor subdivision. The easement was put into place for all the shared driveways, and we collected the agreement and everything. For those 3 driveways that were already installed, that was done not per the approved plans. And the builder started construction and ended up selling off all of the lots. So this is really an after-the-fact request to undo what the code otherwise requires.
Just as a follow-on to that, did the county have to approve the site plans for all 3 that were built?
So the plot plans, which were for construction of the homes, are a separate process from the subdivision ordinance review, which the planners do. So the shared driveway component was included on the approved subdivision plans.
I guess the other piece of that I'm trying to understand is that the health department had to be involved in some way or another for the siting and approval of where those septic fields are.
They were, and those approvals were based on the original subdivision with the 1 shared driveway for all of the lots.
How did they then become located under what is now that shared driveway? Or what was to have been that shared driveway?
They did it contrary to county approval. The builder went out and just installed them there.
So did the DRC consider, on this example, on this proposal in front of us, did the DRC or the applicants consider coming in on the hatched future driveway access at the top and then coming down the property line of the top 2 lots into the bottom 2 lots?
What the DRC asked when it deferred it was for the staff and the applicants to get together and come back. And the only stipulation that we put on it was that minimal number of access routes onto there. And the other concern that we had about this was a comment from the fire department about entry and access. And then, of course, we had the VDOT non-concurrence on it. And so when they came back to the DRC for that second meeting, all 3, the VDOT, fire, and whoever the third one was, all agreed with what was being proposed. So what we got was this. And we discussed it. And of course, the mitigating thing, at least, I mean, not the mitigating, but the factor that really caught me was that house that you see down here at the bottom on lot 2. The guy was getting ready to close on that house, and there was no way that you could accommodate it without going through the septic field. And so whether the builder did it intentionally or not, we were kind of stuck with the impact that this is going to bring. Now, that was the basis of the decision.
I disagree that we're stuck with the impact. This should be the builder's responsibility, because the other option would have been to come in on future driveway access on the lower portion and then take a 90 up between lots 3 and 4 and connect to the other future access to get back to the far lot.
So you're proposing that in lot 4, is that what you're talking about, or is it lot 3 to 90?
Well, you go straight back where it's going to, is that lot 3 in the bottom right-hand corner?
That's lot 2.
All right, so take that going back to lot 2, and you hang a 90 going straight up between the two lots before, and then you can access all 4 of those lots from one drive.
I think the problem is the existing driveway and garage access, and then the easement that's required for the road, which was like 25 feet plus you have a setback, so there wasn't room for it.
I understand. My objection is the fact that, you know, we keep having these conversations about how do we best protect rural lands, and we have all these tools that we employ, and we do this for these family subdivisions that come in, and then we have folks come in after the fact asking for exceptions to AFD removals, driveway exceptions, and I just don't understand why we continually talk about how do we protect our rural lands and then roll over when that piece comes forward. So, you know, again, this kind of ties into my bigger issue that we're forcing the issue of protecting the rural lands on the larger landowners and not the smaller landowners when we have these tools in place, and it should have been caught long in advance of coming to this.
Comments? Mr. Haldeman?
I agree with everything Mr. O'Connor just said. I just wonder what practical options we have. I don't know if we have recourse to the builder, or if we can impose draconian access routes to each of the houses, 3 of which are already built, and then have them seek recourse from the builder, or just accept, swallow it and accept what we have. It's a very difficult thing. My guess is that the owners of the lots were operating in good faith. They probably didn't intentionally try to abuse the regulations, but the builder's a professional. He has to know. And sorry, I'm blithering. I don't have an answer for this.
I happen to agree with you that, unfortunately, it's the owners who are stuck holding the bag on this one, when it should have been, in my opinion, either whoever sold should have been properly platted when it was sold or then built upon.
Mr. Kraft?
Just a question for the county attorney's office, and I agree with everything that's being said. I came into this from a certain perspective, and that's changed a bit when I see that, as Tim and Jack said, the landowners are now holding the bag. But from a legal standpoint, is there any action that could be taken against the builder, whether it be financial or whatever? Because we see these periodically, and I understand mistakes are going to happen with developments, but this is sort of, I'm puzzled by it, how you can go from having that platted family subdivision to the situation that we have now, and a situation where, what Frank, the bottom left lot,
Right.
the house is built, but and is pending closing, but the driveway can't go in unless it takes direct access and not a shared access. Is that essentially it?
I think the practical rationale for that lower right-hand lot is they did and while you see the green driveway, they did a side loading garage on that side of the house. So to sort of reorient the driveway, you'd have to hook around and presumably go behind the house and come out a different way. So I think that was what was driving the practical request for that one.
Is there any recourse that can be taken with the builder?
Well, I mean, at this point, I don't know about any financial piece. We've said, we cannot approve anything that doesn't match up to the approved set of plans. And that's when they initiated the exception request as a way to move forward without amending what they've done. They chose to pursue the exemption request.
More discussion? Rose?
There does seem to be at some point a set of plans that are reflected here with the driveways that were approved. And it seems like maybe there is some miscommunication or some maybe roadblock miss that should have been put in place that referenced back to the one driveway before it was approved. I mean, that's a little bit of what we got in the committee meeting.
I think as I recall it, there was the 219 and sheet 2, and the 219 approval had the shared driveway going right down on Jolly Pond Road, and it had the 25 entrance right near to Lot 3 that everybody would share. I don't recall that it showed all the entrance roads from all the different plots coming in, but that was there. And then we go fast forward to the documents that we saw then in 221 and 222, the site plan documents, and all of that was missing. I do know that in the 219 document, when you looked at that sheet too, one of the stipulations for that shared driveway piece had a bond of like $7,000 to make sure that it was done. Plus there was a soil and water conservation type easement and an approval that needed to take by the stormwater. So all of that was there. But when you go forward to the other site diagrams, none of that are there. Matter of fact, I had to ask for sheet 2 to even be able to find out what was going on, to sort the issue out, to even know what happened. And so you see this evolution of what was originally platted in 219, and then the site plans that were approved in 221 and 22. And so I would agree with both Mr. Haldeman and Mr. O'Connor. This is unfortunate, the way it happened. And believe me, I've not been a fan of multiple driveways in the rural areas for the same reason that you just talked about, Tim. And this one was really a tough one for me because of what had happened with the owners. Whether they knew it or not, they are left holding the bag on it. And so that, I think, is after everything was done and said, we didn't think they should be penalized. And I wish there was a way for the developer, but that's where we kind of are. Mr. Rose? Okay. More discussion, or do I have a motion? Motion on the floor?
Mr. Rogers.
Sorry, can you state them? I lost track of exactly what the motion
Yeah,
is
a
at this
motion
point.
to approve the exception request as presented on the screen.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
No.
Mr. Crop. And Mr. Polster.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right, so now that takes us to the main agenda item of the public hearings. And our first item on the public hearing for tonight is SUP 23003, 2884 Chickahominy Road Tourist Home. Ms. Costello, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Mr. James Carter of Hunter Law Firm has applied for a special use permit to allow for the short-term rental of a 4-bedroom, single-family home at 2884 Chickahominy Road. The property is zoned R8 Rural Residential and designated rural lands at the Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map and is located outside the primary service area. The property is served by public water and private sewer. If granted, this SUP would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed. Staff finds some favorable factors for this application, such as the presence of adequate off-street parking and that the applicant has stated he will obtain the proper licensing and inspections. Staff finds the proposed use will not negatively impact surrounding property or development, nor is it expected to negatively impact levels of service for roads and other public services. While staff believes the location is generally considered appropriate for this use, staff finds that the proposal is not fully consistent with the adopted 2045 Comprehensive Plan recommendations for short-term rentals. Therefore, staff is unable to recommend approval of this application. Should the Planning Commission recommend approval of this application, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I am happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available.
Are there any questions for staff? Thank you very much. So I will open the public hearing, and we have one presentation card. Mr. Carter, welcome.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is James Carter, and I'm from the Hunter Law Firm on behalf of my clients, Gloria Suarez and Mario Medina. We are before the commission today regarding special use permit 23-003, which was filed by council on behalf of the property owners on January 24th, 2023. The nature of this application is to allow the property to be utilized as a tourist home, and the location is 2884 Chickahominy Road, Toano, Virginia. This is a property which is located, it's zoned R8 rural residential, and is located in the Stonehouse District. It is a property of approximately 5 acres. As you can see from the overhead, this is a flag lot with a long meandering driveway, and the residence is located at the back right corner of the lot. It's approximately 200 to 300 yards off of the road. The property cannot be seen from the road. It also exists outside of the primary service area. This is a recently constructed home in 2014, and it is a significant upgrade from the previous structure there. Previously, there was a residence which was valued at $67,000, and then in 2014, the prior owners of Tebow's tore down that residence and rebuilt a much larger structure, 3,000 square feet, which has 4 bedrooms and 3 baths, and also has a 600 square foot covered porch, which overlooks the backyard. Their backyard, one of the factors that makes this property unique is that it overlooks the Newport News Waterworks Little Creek Reservoir watershed. So when you look out the back window, you're actually looking out over the watershed and the swamp towards the finger of the reservoir. The nearest neighbor is Chickahominy Baptist Church. They are the driveway immediately after the church parking lot. And if you notice, to give you a physical orientation, when you come down Chickahominy Road and you turn left onto Cranston's Mill Pond Road, the next driveway after the church is the driveway which extends to my client's house. The other affected properties or potentially affected properties would be the previous 5 residences which are on Chickahominy Road approaching Chickahominy Baptist Church, but they are oriented to the front of the parcels so that they have the entire length of the parcel plus several hundred feet of woodland between the residence and the other parcels which are adjoining. Therefore, there is no contact or visual contact between any of the parcels. The parcel is worth approximately $700,000 at this point in time. It does correspond to the ordinance in 2 regards. It is in a rural area and it is not in a platted subdivision. The issue that we have and the reason why we're before you today asking for the special use permit is because it does deviate from the ordinance in these factors. One is that it is not on a major road. There are no major roads except for Chickahominy Road going down there. It's not a major road. But if the issue is overburdening the level of service for Chickahominy Road, I would submit to you that this has less traffic than a normal single-family residence. It's a partial residence which is going to be rented out sporadically, so I would submit to you that it has less traffic than an actual single-family residence which is occupied long-term, and also in comparison to the use of the institution next door, Chickahominy Baptist Church, which has services on Sundays and choir practice on Wednesdays, etc. They normally have 100 or 200 people come down that road, and if they are not overburdening Chickahominy Road by virtue of going to the church next door to it, I don't see any way that having a private residence would overburden the level of service for Chickahominy Road. The other issue is that the owners reside in Danville. My clients bought this as a second home, primarily for their daughter to live in when she attended William & Mary. She's an outstanding student, and she was granted a scholarship, and so she has gone to school abroad as opposed to attending William & Mary. And their son, we are pleased to report, has just received a commission from the United States Military Academy at West Point, so he will also not be attending William & Mary except for possibly grad school. But at any rate, this now leaves them with a property that that is not going to be occupied by a family member. Previously, this property was run on VRBO by the previous owners, the Tebows, and there was never any issue with noise or any complaints from the neighbors. In fact, you can't see the house, and I don't know if anyone ever knew what was actually going on. At this point in time, in order to ameliorate the fact that they do not live on the premises, they have a resident manager, and that is Ms. Jessica Dellenbach. She is a property owner who resides at 2584 Little Creek Dam Road, which is the next street down on the left-hand side, and it's approximately 3,000 feet away. She has been the primary caretaker of this property for the previous owners and for my clients right now, and she is a member of the community. If you are concerned about about maintaining the standards and quality of the community itself. She is a member of the community. She resided there prior to this house being built, and I would submit that she has a vested interest as a stakeholder in maintaining the quality and character. And also, the location of her house is such that she has to pass by this parcel to go to and from her residence every day. So she would have eyes on the property. The tenants would be able to have instant access to a caretaker. And if anything untoward were to happen, or if they were to exceed the scope of their rental contract, it would be known and we would instantly be able to take action. So they do have a resident manager, is just not a property owner on site. She's approximately 3,000 feet away. Because this property is not in the primary service area, it does not incur a tax burden upon the county. The nature of the improvements of the house, from a $67,000 house to a $370,000 house, clearly have increased the tax base in terms of real estate taxes. And if this property were allowed to have a special use permit to operate as a tourist home, it would further incur room and board taxes for the county as well. So this is a net income generator for the county. It does not drain any assets. It is a distinct property which is isolated. And I think that the nature of this rental property is one for someone who desires solitude, for someone who desires seclusion. If you look out of any of the windows, you can see nothing but woods and reservoir. And that is kind of at odds with the criteria which states that you have to have a resident manager living on the premises. The kind of person who would want to rent this property would want to be alone, would want to be isolated and secluded, and having to have a resident manager inside the house with them might be at odds with their intent for renting this property. So we would ask that we grant a special use permit allowing a tourist home on this premises, with the acknowledgement that it does not overburden the level of service for Chickahominy Road compared to the parcel right beside it, and with being cognizant of the fact that we do have a resident manager who is close by, who is a property owner, who does have a vested interest in maintaining the characteristics and quality of the neighborhood, and who is in close contact with not only the parcel, but the parcel owners who are abroad. I have no further presentation for you, but I am open to any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions of the applicant? I just had a follow-on for staff, and maybe the applicant can answer this. Did I understand correctly that the former owners, the Tebows, are the ones that started this rental property? Is that correct?
I'm not sure which one of the owners had the application. I do have the date, though, that, we sent a letter to the owner in December of 2022, so we sent it to the current owner. They could have been doing it before the current owner, but we became aware that the current owner was doing it, and we sent a violation letter to them, or a reach-out letter to them in December.
Carter, can you shed any light on this?
Yes, I can. What I am aware of is that Mrs. Dellenbach they inherited Mrs. Dellenbach. She came as part of the package. They did not know her prior to purchasing the residence. So she was in a capacity of caretaker for the previous owners prior to my clients purchasing the residence.
So as far as you know, your current client never knew that there was a problem until she got the
None
letter.
whatsoever. She just adopted the same working model that the previous owners had, and then received a violation order several months after they had begun or continued on with the process that was currently at hand.
Thank you. And I guess the last question I had for staff was, did I understand that in your staff report that it was acceptable on the staff's point about having a manager as opposed to the owner at the property?
As far as when we review it, the comp plan says the owner, so we stated that the owner is not living on the property, however, a caretaker is nearby. So we evaluate it still that the owner needs to live on the property.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
One more thing. We have contemplated some workarounds, including granting Mrs. Dellenbach a 1% of the fee simple so that she would qualify as an owner. She would not be residing on the property, but if that gave you any more confidence that someone was a stakeholder, a true stakeholder in the property itself, they would even consider granting her a portion of the fee simple to make her a property owner as well, just in order to facilitate this. So they would be willing to do that as a contingency if necessary.
Thank you. Is there any more questions for the applicant or for the staff?
Just to clarify, it was being marketed and utilized as a short-term rental, which got us to this point today. And which vehicle was used? VRBO? Is that what I heard?
I believe that the original owners were using VRBO, and I believe that that is the current platform that it was also discovered upon by Mr. Rogerson.
So
It has been removed, though. It has been removed as soon as they got their letter. They removed it from the
No,
market.
I understand. So I'm just curious as to whether or not your clients, when they registered for VRBO, bothered to read all the pieces about knowing your local tax laws, knowing your local zoning laws, and all those pieces. I mean, it's clearly stated on several of these short-term rental websites.
I did not do the closing for the purchase of this property. I do believe that they proceeded under the same course of conduct that the previous property owners had, and I don't think that they looked too much further into that. They probably should have done that to exercise their due diligence, but I cannot tell you that they have or that they ignored it. I just believe they continued on the same course of conduct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this issue? Hearing none, I will close the public comment and open it up to the board for discussion or a motion.
From
Mr. Kraft.
my standpoint, Mr. Chairman, when these cases have come up before, I've differentiated between, in my perspective is that the performance standards for short-term rentals are really geared to a problem that occurred within residential zoning districts, residential neighborhoods, the fear of some of the established homeowners that a transient population coming in and out would bring some associated problems, whether it be traffic or unknown occupants or whatever. So I've in my mind, on previous cases, differentiated between residentially zoned districts and something like this that's outside even outside the PSA and has no impact on any residential area. Since recently, too, there's been a new condition added to these SUP requests that allows for a periodic review of whether there's complaints, whether the owner is compliant with the conditions and so on and so forth, or if there's any issues that the SUP could be yanked. So this no longer goes in perpetuity. Also, I have also felt that having a manager, not even necessarily in the residence, but within a reasonable distance from the residence, is another guarantee to make sure that the management is going to be appropriate for the property. So based on all those, I'm going to support this application for those reasons.
Mr. Haldeman?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval for SUP-23-0003, 2884 Chickahominy Road Tourist Home with associated conditions.
Motion, Mr. Conditions, right. The motion.
Mr. Croft?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
No.
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Rose?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
And Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, our next item is SUP 230010, 2884 Lake Powell Road Tourist Home. Ms. Costello, you're up again. Oh, got to get the right notes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dina Waltrip has applied for a special use permit to allow for the short-term rental of a 4-bedroom, single-family home at 2884 Lake Powell Road. The property is zoned R2, general residential, designated low-density residential on the comprehensive plan land use map, and is located inside the primary service area. The property is served by private water and public sewer. If granted, this SUP would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed. Staff finds some favorable factors for this application, such as the presence of adequate off-street parking and that the owner will obtain the proper licensing and inspections. Staff finds the proposed use will not negatively impact levels of service for roads and other public services. Staff finds the proposal to be incompatible with surrounding development and not consistent with the recommendations for short-term rentals in the 2045 Comprehensive Plan. Staff therefore does not recommend approval of this application. Should the Planning Commission wish to recommend approval, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I am happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available.
Questions for staff? Thank you, Ms. Costello. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation?
Sorry, can't see. Good evening. My name is Dina Waltrip. I reside at 2884 Lake Powell Road. I'm a lifelong resident of James City County. I've been an employee for James City Service Authority for close to 23 years. My oldest child lives in the upper part of the county, and my youngest is serving in the Air Force. So now I'm an empty nester. I have a single-story, 3-bedroom, 3-bath home that I would like to use as a short-term rental. It's pretty much next door to Williamsburg, Jamestown Airport, Williamsburg Landing, Williamsburg Winery. On any given day in that rural area, we see deer, turkey, geese, we even have bald eagles. But we're still within minutes of the major attractions of James City County. My home is located on a private drive easement that is off of the major road of Lake Powell. Our property is not in a subdivision. The surrounding homes or nearby homes to mine are all family, which means my property is pretty much one of the safest places in James City County for visitors. I think you may have letters from my brothers who were unable to be here, and I have Tracy Douglas, who is brother by heart, who has a home in the area also. When I'm not staying in the home with renters, I will be staying at my childhood home, which is located next door, maybe 75 feet away. There are numerous reasons why I'm wanting to do this short-term rental. Where I work, a lot of people have second jobs to help cover monthly expenses. However, in my position, I am on call 24/7, 365. This will help me make ends meet, along with starting a nest egg, so hopefully one day I might be able to retire, and also to help my children and grandchildren. I do appreciate you taking time to hear me, and I appreciate your consideration, and I am able to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for the applicant? We thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I will open the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak? And my first speaker card is Mr. Tracy Douglas. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Tracy Douglas. I reside at 2862 Lake Powell Road, and I own the property which is adjacent to Ms. Waltrip at 129 Douglas Lane. It is currently a long-term rental. It will be occupied by my daughter in the consequent months coming, so I have no issues with that house being a short-term rental. They've been great neighbors. I've lived on Douglas Lane my whole life, and they've lived on Eubank Drive their whole lives, so we've known each other. We're like family, so I have no issues with the home being a tourist home. Questions?
For the staff, can you point out on the map where 2862 Lake Powell Road is?
Well, my property, rental property, 129 Douglas Lane, is adjacent to Ms. Waltrip's. It's the larger portion right there, just below the red square.
The mouse, can maybe you help? Right with the mouse.
Oh, I can.
Okay. It's hard to see on TV when you.
No, go up some. This is the wooded house just below the red square.
This one.
Go up one.
Other side of the
a little
street.
bit. No, the other way.
Oh, this one.
This one. That one.
Okay, that
right
one.
there.
The rest of us were there.
That's my long-term rental.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker card is Miss Emily Martell.
Button for the next one.
Okay, do we have any more folks who would like to speak? Okay, I will close the public hearing and open it up for discussion among commissioners.
I was gonna offer for the last case, but Mr. Haldeman made a motion prior. It kind of goes back to my original comments, like why did we bother updating the comp plan, and why did we bother putting ordinance requirements in place if we're not gonna enforce them. You know, I just find these, this application to be inconsistent with the comp plan, so I will not be supporting it.
Any other comments or discussion? Can I have the staff put up the one diagram that shows all the current tourist homes and the proposed tourist homes? Can we put that one up?
Second here. So what you'll see on this map, Terry, if you could come up to the, let's walk everybody through the teal boxes and the red boxes.
So the blue ones right here are the ones that are already approved. This is the same property right there. It's just, there's a road in between it. But this portion is where the SUP is on Mark Clay Road. These two, and then this one down here are approved. And then these two in the red, 2884, and then this one, 2868, are before you tonight.
So the last gentleman that was just up there, who operates a short-term rental, which is right next to it, isn't on this map.
He said long-term rental.
Long-term, oh, okay, good,
More
that's
than 30
important. Okay, so that's a long-term rental.
Long-term rental.
Okay.
Yep.
I guess the point that I asked for staff to put this together was kind of the cumulative impact of what we're doing as we go over time for this. And does it change the neighborhood? Does it alter it in the right place? And so I just opened that up for consideration on this. I mean, I understand that we've had, 28 folks that we've discovered that have not gone through the proper process of getting their homes approved. And I know that we're probably going to see a lot more. I mean, we've still got probably 20 plus to come in. And it bothers me about not knowing and seeing and what that means to these neighborhoods in the long-term area. And I'm kind of back to what Mr. Kraft was talking about in the last one, is that we on purpose kind of did this to try to enhance the rural landscape for it. And I understand the idea that, you know, this may be close to it, but when you start seeing the numbers that we're talking about in the air, I kind of get a little nervous about that piece. So I'm kind of up in the middle of this thing for it. And we're going to talk about more of these in this area. So that's kind of where I stand at this point. Mr. Kraft.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you how you're analyzing this, and in this case, going with my comments from the previous case, this one is designated low-density residential on the comprehensive plan. While it's not within a subdivision, there are houses. Houses nearby, residences nearby, and there's two cases tonight just on that road. And so, looking at the trend, to me, this is not where the comp plan wants us to go with the short-term rentals inside these sorts of zoning districts and land use districts. So, even though right now it's got some open space, I am concerned about the near-term future and the number of applications that we're starting to get. So I will not be supporting this one.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussions? Rose?
Maybe a bit of a question. We have approved the other ones around the corner. It seems like the biggest issue here is that it's on low-density residential. Are those not on low-density residential lands?
All of the approved ones in that area are low-density residential.
In those cases.
I think in the case of at least one of those that I know of, it was in the airport district of that for it.
But another one of these.
Oh, I'm sorry, the airport one was designated airport, that property, but
And then
the
the other
other
one is
ones.
the main road. So when you look at the ones that are on the blue, except for the exception of the airport, they're on the main road, which is the Pocahontas Trail. And this one clearly isn't there, and it's clearly in the residential. So I'm kind of making a scorecard. You know, I'm looking for at least 3 out of the 4. And when I start bumping into 2 for 2, I start to say, and then I look at the density that I'm seeing and where we're headed for this thing, I'm up in the air because it's missed 2 of the 4 plus. So that's where I am. More discussion, questions?
I would just say, for me, it's part of the larger discussion too, because, you know, we have homes that can be available for rental, and, you know, we continue, you know, for me, it ties into the larger discussion that we're having about density, and if we're gonna reduce density inside the PSA, you know, it's going to impact affordability, and to continue to impact affordability by taking rental homes out of the housing stock, you know, it'll continue to have a negative effect on the housing stock that's outside of homeowners associations in this community.
I'm concerned about the same issue, especially when you look at the price points for both of these properties. Mr. Haldeman.
I'm not going to support this tonight, but just a couple of asides. The flip side of affordability is, and I'm not referring to this one house because I don't know the details, but income from short-term rental can actually provide affordability for the owner. We've had a couple of applications where I suspected that without the income from rental, the owner couldn't afford to live there. So yes, it does take a house off the market that might otherwise be on the market, but on the other hand, it may help a homeowner to stay in their home. The other issue that just came up for the first time is the number of these that we're seeing, and the implication that we've kind of reached a saturation point, I guess, and that maybe if this application had come up 2 or 3 years ago before we had as many applications as we had, that we might approve it. And I wonder if that's, you know, the luck of the draw. If you apply early or you apply late, and if you applied after we've already had an influx of these, you're not going to get approved, even though you have the same qualifications as houses that have been approved earlier. I don't know if I made that clear or not, but that's a concern of mine. Doesn't change my vote tonight, but just on an ongoing basis, I think we should deal with that. Thank you.
Rogers.
I don't know if there's a way to generalize an answer, staff, to my question, because I know every case is different. But these ones that we've approved, and I was here for the airport one, so that one I remember pretty clearly, but were there similar things that we came as a planning commission to consensus as to why it met enough of the criteria? Like, we're talking about our scorecards, pardon me. And at least for me, what I thought was always an important piece was this owner-occupied, a home that's not a rental, which to me, this particular case, the way I'm reading it, subject to review in a couple of years, is actually one of the more obvious homes that's not, it's not going to become it's not going to go for sale if we disapprove it, right? It sounds like the Waltrips are like ensconced out there, like in a good way. But I mean, like a family compound, right? So, you know, to me, listening to it and reading about it, I see a number of protections in place. I'm just wondering, as a commission, were we all in agreement that the other properties shown on the map were as protective?
For Rogers, I'm going to answer that really by saying I don't want to trust our memories enough here tonight to speculate and to be able to provide a thorough synopsis about the Planning Commission meetings discussions at the time. You know, certainly depending on whatever you want to do with this application tonight, whether or not you send it forward or not tonight or postpone it or what have you, all of those options still remain available. I would feel much better if we're able to answer your question by going back, pulling those minutes, and we can get those sent back out to you.
Let me make a comment on this. Is the near-term, short-term rental is a rather new phenomenon to the county in terms of the gig economy that started, 4 or 5 years ago. And I would tell you that we struggled with every one of the cases to include the comp plan and trying to come up with a set of requirements that we thought we were comfortable based on what we knew. And it's changed even through that. I mean, the one piece that I'm more comfortable about that I wasn't before was the fact that either the owner is there or there's a close manager. And in at least one of the cases that I know of, at least on this, that's the case. So it's kind of like one of the other things that we're going to be confronting with real soon here in the policy side with the solar is we're kind of learning as we're going along and being able to see what the impacts of this are based on what we've done. And so the only one that I know of that's made a lot of sense to us that makes me a little bit more comfortable, Mr. Kraft mentioned that earlier, was the fact that the SUP for this is not in perpetuity. There is a recourse for the county if there's bad behavior, then to go back and say the conditions are revoked and bump off we go. So I kind of think that we're still figuring this out as we go along, and the circumstances for each of the ones over time have migrated over it. I mean, the one on Rochambeau with the caretaker, which was next door, just like the Chickahominy, was a perfect example where we've kind of shifted in that piece for it. So if that helps at all, that's kind of how I look at this thing. But you're still trying to grapple with what we put into the comp plan. Mr. Holman.
I think Mr. Holt was wise in urging us not to trust our memories back too far, but I just go back to the last application. The difference, which I supported, the difference was, to me, the last applicant was not going to affect the residential character of the area. He was well off the road, well buffered. There was no significant impact on roads or schools or safety or anything else. And so I was very comfortable, even though it wasn't 100% in compliance, I was very comfortable in supporting that. This is surrounded by other homes. This is a neighborhood. It's off the major road. The other ones are on Lake Powell Road, the other blue ones. It's an easy distinction for me to make, I think, so.
For discussion or a motion?
Maybe
Rose.
a couple questions. You mentioned that the SUP can be revoked if conditions aren't met, but we still don't have a way to revoke it if the property is sold, correct? If it's sold, the SUP transfers with the property.
SUP runs with the land unless and until ever revoked by the board. However, as you see in your packet, there is an expectation for a review for the board to consider whether or not to begin the revocation process or not in the near future.
But if I recall correctly, Ms. Costello, there's a specific date in the condition that says when it will be reviewed by the board.
Yes, the owner is required to let the planning director know in the end of 2025, and then it's supposed to go back to the board February 2026.
There is a way for it to trigger so it just doesn't fall underneath. Anyhow, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and, I will point out, and I'm honestly still undecided here, that in most of these cases, and we're not going to go into the specifics, we do make exceptions because I don't think we've seen many that adhere to every one of the requirements. And we make those exceptions based on what we think is the impact. I know this is within a community, although the access is off of Lake Powell Road. But in terms of community impact, we know that the neighboring lot is a full year rental, potentially another one up as an SUP for a short-term rental. We don't have anyone from the community saying this has been a negative impact on the community. So we're making a judgment call with, I don't know if we have the information to assume that it's having that negative impact that maybe we're receiving in this case.
But I think, for me, I think it's been pretty consistent. And my concern is it's not that we're approving a VRBO or we're approving an Airbnb or we're approving a tourist home. We are approving short-term rentals, which, can change drastically the the tone and tenor of a neighborhood and a community. Because there's no condition that says that those short-term rentals have to be, tourists. I mean, it could just, we could have homes where there are people moving in and out frequently, and not just in this community, but in all the other Airbnbs I've opposed. That's been a big portion of my complaint, but my challenge to it is that we're just approving short-term rentals. We're not approving vehicles. We're not setting conditions on that. We're just saying it's okay to go out and rent your home by the day, by the week, by any period less than 30 days. And that's really where a lot of my concern comes from, because that can drastically change a neighborhood.
Additional discussion, or do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend denial of SUP 23-00092868 Lake Powell tourist home with conditions.
As a reminder, the vote,
And so if a yes vote would be to recommend that this application not be approved to the Board of Supervisors, and a no vote would be in favor of that.
I think he mentioned 9, it should be 10.
Yeah, we're on SUP 23-0010.
Excuse me.
That's okay. Mr. Crop,
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman,
Aye.
Mr. Rose,
No.
Mr. Rogers,
No.
Mr. Polster.
aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, our next item on our agenda is SUP 23-0010.
009.
I'm sorry, 0019. Boy, I missed one.
So 09, not
We
19.
adapted.
Right, SUP 23-009-2868 Lake Powell Tourist Home. Ms. Costello again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Ms. Mary Waltrip has applied for a special use permit to allow for the short-term rental of up to 5 rooms in a single-family home at 2868 Lake Powell Road. The property is zoned R2 General Residential, designated low-density residential on the Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map, and is located inside the primary service area. The property is served by private water and public sewer. If granted, this SUP would allow for short-term rentals throughout the year. No changes to the footprint of the home are proposed. Staff finds some favorable factors for this application, such as the presence of adequate off-street parking and that the owner will live on site. Staff finds the proposed use will not negatively impact levels of service for roads and other public services. Staff finds the proposal to be incompatible with surrounding development and not consistent with the recommendations for short-term rentals in the 2045 Comprehensive Plan. Staff therefore does not recommend approval of this application. Should the Planning Commission wish to recommend approval, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I am happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available.
Questions for Ms. Costello? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing, and the first speaker card I have is Ms. Lisa Waltrip.
I am Lisa Waltrip, and with my mom, Becky Waltrip, we reside at 2868 Lake Powell Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I'm kind of getting off course because I just want y'all to be aware. The property, just like where my sister lives, was all owned by my father. It is a compound. We call it all different names. From the time I was little, I called it the Dumperosa because there was a landfill there. My sister calls it the plantation. You know, it's all family. My siblings, my brothers, my sister, my nephew, it's all property, and all the homes around there are our family. I just want you to know that. And everyone agrees. There's a letter in your packet from everybody on the lane. But the reason I'm here and the reason we started at my mom and dad's home back in the fall is because I've been taking care of both my parents. They have Alzheimer's. My mother has Alzheimer's. My dad, dementia, and had major heart issues come up 2.5 years ago. And because of my dad's kindness and good heart, when things went bad, he chose to pay his employees and not take care of him and my mom. So at 82 years old, my parents still have a mortgage. So after having friends and a neighbor, Emily, who suggested us try to do the Airbnb to make extra money, that's why I chose to do it. The funny thing is, I literally called her the Friday that we got the letter, and I said, okay, I've tried it for 2 months. It looks like it can work. So Monday, I'm going to go down to the county office and find out if I need to get a business permit or what needs to be done, because I really didn't know. An hour later, we got the doorbell rang, and it was the person with the mail bringing the letter, so I'm like, isn't that ironic? So that's the reason we are doing the SUP. And most of you are probably aware, you know my dad, Dudley, or Timmy Waltrip, that he passed away recently. And he had planned to come and talk, and I kept telling him, Dad, I don't think you can talk because they don't want to hear that you cleared the land here where the building is and Kings Mill and all around the county. But I will tell you that my dad really loved the county, and he was looking forward to being here to support my sister and myself. And I just want to be thankful that my mom's out here tonight with me. But we are seeking a SUP for a tourist home rental, and this falls under the short-term rentals. The property has many benefits. It's close to local businesses, like you've heard from all the other homes in the area, Williamsburg Winery, and it faces the big hill that Yardworks is behind. Our family-owned airport, the Williamsburg-Jamestown Airport, is on the same in the same area. Our location is on a private road off of Lake Powell Road, which is a main road. My sister's home is at the very back that you cannot even see from the main road of Lake Powell. Our location, it's so neat because all the guests and even my mom and I will sit on the front porch and you see the big hill. It's like you're in the country, but you're so close to everything and easy access to, stores and busch gardens and all of that. We are surrounded by family, just like I said. And there's just one letter, and the ones on the lane signed it. I also believe one of the main advantages is the home is a modular home that was connected to a home that's been there for many, many years. From the time I was little, I remember that home being there. Well, so it's like two homes connected. And my daughter lives in the one older part of the home, and that used to be like my dad's room down there at night where he'd watch TV and stuff like that. But when we have guests in our home, there is a way that we close off the main two-story house from the older home. My daughter lives full-time in the older part of the home, and the home is never left unattended at all. Someone is always there. My dad, my mom, and myself have stayed there before also. And my dad was really hard to get to leave Lake Powell Road. So sometimes he'd stay there with my daughter, and my mom and I would go to Toanna where my husband and I have a home. Sorry, this is hard. The economy also benefits bringing more tax money into the county. I've not only gotten to take care of my parents full time. I've held it together for 10 days, 9 days, so I didn't want to lose it here. But I get to enjoy my passion of hospitality and decor. I get to meet new people along with decorating for the different holidays and seasons. That's why I named my parents' home the Holiday Home. The the holiday home, and it's one of the favorite things that guests like us staying at their home. Something I really like about having other short-term rentals on our lane is because in December, I had a serious fall right before someone was supposed to come, and this was before I got the letter. And I was having to take it to the ER in an ambulance, but someone was quickly able to get Emily, and she was able to take care of my guests, thank goodness. But it's like we have a little support group, and not just with us there, but throughout the Williamsburg area. My goal is to take care of my mother and be able to have extra finances so she does not have to be taken to a home at any time in her life, and she can stay at her home. And yes, Mr. Haldeman, you're right. A lot of us, just like my parents, would not be able to afford their home, or it puts a real burden on the children who are struggling to make ends meet nowadays to not have that extra income. So I appreciate you for bringing up that. But, sorry. I would just like to say that I know it's something new in the county, but I know numerous people who have Airbnbs, and everyone takes such good care of their property. If you have driven down Lake Powell Road in years past, it looks like dumps down there. I mean, it looked terrible. Why didn't the county ever go to those people and say, hey, y'all need to clean up your yard or your house or something? Now when the people come in and do Airbnbs, the homes look beautiful. You drive down Lake Powell Road, it looks like little cottages. You know, it really, I can't think of anywhere that it has been a negativity of the community. I do understand that it's something new and that the, you know, it's kind of just like booming. So of course the county is trying to, you know, figure out what to do or what to allow. And I do think the one thing that y'all are doing is really good, where you're only allowing it for so many years. So that way, if a home is sold and somebody wants to do something, they're going to have to come back and get approved also. They're not going to be able to just keep doing this forever. But I can assure you, the homes on our property will, just like one of my parents' rental homes was sold to my nephew, I would be totally shocked if any of the homes on our property would ever be sold to anyone except family. And that's one thing I like about our little compound or plantation or whatever, is because it's all community. And when people come to our home, that's one thing they like, because everybody gets around the fire pit. You know, everybody's friendly. They watch out for each other. And, you know, we're all family. So I just want to thank you, and I just hope you do reconsider, you know, your thoughts tonight, and you will approve this one. Thank you. Have a blessed evening. Oh, do you have any questions? I'm sorry.
Do you have any questions for the applicant? Oh, ma'am.
Thank you.
The next speaker card I have is Mr. Ryan Martin. Ryan Martin, 3158 Jolly Pond Road. Okay. Trey Douglas.
Evening again, gentlemen. My name is Tracy Douglas. I reside at 2862 Lake Powell Road. I was going to point it on the map if I can. It is directly on your map below the Waltrip's home. I also own the home at 2860 Lake Powell Road, which is right in front of me. That is a long-term rental. I own the residence at 111 Douglas Lane and 113 Douglas Lane, and of course 129 Douglas Lane. They're all long-term rentals. And I caretake the properties at 119, 121 Douglas Lane, which is a duplex owned by my mother, and I take care of that. And so she's kind of hands off. And one side of the duplex is occupied by my brother, and one of my rentals is actually being rented by Miss Waltrip's former son-in-law. So when we're talking about the whole area right there, that's all family, that's all mostly me, except the house at 2858 Lake Powell Road is owned by someone else. But basically, the whole back half, from where you see Douglas Lane, is owned by me. And so it's we all are considered family, so I have no issues with that house being a short-term rental. So,
Thank you.
any questions?
Thank you very much. My next speaker card is Emily Martell.
Hello, I'm Emily Martell. I live at 2886 Lake Powell Road, so directly across the street from Miss Lisa, who is here tonight. I am one of the only ones actually on Eubank Drive that is not a Wall Trip. So when my husband and I purchased that home, well, that could be really intimidating. It wound up being honestly a blessing. We're a part of the amazing family barbecues, and their memories my kids and I will cherish forever. So we too feel like they are family. They have been family. So we have no issue with this. I am the one who just was approved for an SUP on this lane. So if you're looking at the map, I don't see the mouse, but I'm right off of Lake Powell Road. The access to my home is also on John Eubank, the same lane that you would have to turn down to get to these homes this evening. I suggested this because in passing I heard some of the struggles that the family had that we all go through in life, right? So you can really fight to get through those struggles, or you can make it easier, and I felt like I had a solution to make their life a little easier. So I suggested short-term rental because it gives you the freedom of staying in your home, the home that these people clearly want to continue to have and to reside in, but to be able to open it up when you need that extra help. So it's that freedom of it's not like the previous applicant earlier this evening who is going to rent it all the time. These ladies are staying in their home and renting it up occasionally, as am myself. So I do support this. I think that it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to continue the family on this lane. And on a personal note, the women who have spoken this evening, they lost their father this week. So the fact that they're here is not only admirable, but I think that it speaks volumes to the fact that this short-term rental is not only a want, but really and truly a need for them to be able to continue in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers on this issue? If not, and seeing none, I will close the public comment and open it up to the commissioners for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend, or I make a motion that we recommend denial of SUP 23-0009, 2868 Lake Powell Road Tourist Home with attached conditions.
Clarification?
So similar to the last case, an aye vote or yes vote would be in support of the recommendation to not approve this to the board. And for this case, if the motion prevails similar to the last case, the case will still be heard by the board. They'll have their own separate public hearing, and they'll have a separate vote as well. Motion on the floor. Mr. Croft.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman.
Aye.
Mr. Rose.
Oh.
Mr. Rogers.
No.
Aye.
Polster, aye. Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to the Planning Commission considerations. And we have Mr. O'Connor as the Board of Supervisors representative. Good luck with that one. That's a long evening.
I'm willing to offer that up to anybody else if they're interested, so.
Are there any considerations or requests? Okay, we're moving on to Planning Director's report. Mr. Holt.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Other than what's been included in the planning director's report, I don't have anything additional this evening. A lot of good updates in there, but be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions for Mr. Holt? I noted that you had the new ordinance in there for solar farms. Was there a particular reason that you placed it in there?
Really, since that was done at board action,
Okay,
it's really just as an FYI to keep the planning commission in the loop, for sure.
okay, that was great.
Yep.
All right, so that comes to planning commission discussions and requests. And I wanted to bring up again the issue of the 13 April Policy Committee report. And the idea behind this is to have a discussion with all the planning commissioners with the notion that when we go to our joint planning commission and board meeting on the 23rd of May at 1 o'clock, this issue would end up being on the agenda for discussion. And so you may want to ask the members of the policy committee where they sit, or you want to have a discussion about that so that you understand what the issues are, Mr. Rose and Mr. Rogers.
Just to add a little bit more context, as staff, it would be helpful to the degree that there is a either consensus or not a consensus on a particular option. It'd be helpful for me to know that just as we prepare the materials and get ready for that meeting. We can include some of the conversation tonight. We can, because really we sort of ended at a point where at the last policy committee meeting, there really wasn't a firm vote or sense of consensus. And so, happy to carry that dialogue through as is, or anything else supplemental that may.
Let me see if I can kick it off then.
Yeah.
I think there were really, in Mr. Weissong's report that you saw in that last email, there were really 4 options. And the first one that was the overlay district, of which the policy committee had looked at that and said no to it. And in fact, in Mr. Weissong's letter, the county attorney doesn't support that either. There was the question for the staff that we asked them to review on the variable heights and setback pieces. Did I get that right, Tim? And so the county attorney came back and didn't recommend that for a variety of reasons. The next option is keep it at the 75 foot, which is what it is right now. And then the third option is you could do 200 or 400 foot, and there was nothing to Mr. Weissong's to say that. And then the last piece was that if you take a look at where we are on this, is if you do a setback for Forge Road, it also applies to Barnesville because they're both agricultural corridors. And so I did a Solomon piece and said, okay, let's split the baby and see if we can just do one. And in order to do that, we would have to say no to it right now, kick it down the road and say the next comp plan update, withdraw the Barnesville from the agricultural corridor, put it in a wooded one, which works for that, and then a recommendation in the comp plan to come back then and relook the buffer for Forge Road. So those were kind of the options. I don't know if you want to, each of the members of the policy committee want to make a comment about where they stand on any of those. Mr. Kraft?
I'll start. I was leaning toward the proposal before us was to mandate setbacks, development setbacks from scenic roadways. In this case, we'll talk Forge Road. And I was supportive of the proposal that said, okay, for lots that are 500 feet or more in depth, there's a 400-foot setback. For a lot that is less than 500 feet in depth, but there was a smaller number at the bottom. 75, right. That if it's less than 500 feet, we'd support a 200-foot setback, and then the existing setback is 85 feet, the way the ordinance reads right now. And one of my concerns is, well, I'll make this very brief. The two issues that weigh for me is, number one, for the all the comp plans that I've been involved in, and there's 3 or 4 of them that I've been involved in, the citizen survey consistently says protecting rural lands and the rural vistas is over 90% supported by the residents of James City County. And then the other thing that I'm seeing is there have been some residential developments approved on Forge Road, and I'm starting to see the houses being built there. And even though those houses are being built at the 400-foot setback point, to me, they're starting to alter the vista significantly. And so I am very much supportive of the 400-foot setback. And I don't view that restriction as denying a landowner the use of their property. It just means they can't build in that 400-foot frontage. They can use it if you drive up and down that road. It's used right up to the end of the property line where the fences are for horses, for farmland, and other things. So I feel that it's the better of both worlds in the sense that it protects the view shed. It does not deny the use of the land. It just denies building on that. And to me, allowing closer than 400 feet is a violation of the intent of the comp plan. And so that's where I've landed on this.
I missed the last policy committee meeting, so I didn't hear the discussion on the last option, which is to delay this until after the next comprehensive plan. I had, before that, kind of come to the conclusion that 200 feet is adequate, that a lot of these homes, as Mr. Croft just said, in that part of the world with the larger lots tend to sit back off the road anyway. People who want to live in a rural environment don't want to live right up against the road. 200 feet, based on the material that was provided by staff, looked to me to be adequate. But I don't mind. The problem we've had was on Barnesville Road, which is almost fully developed with smaller lots, not the bigger lots. And so if we want to delay this until after the next comprehensive plan, change the character of Barnesville Road to wooded community character, that sounds like a reasonable option too. Can we make a decision on this tonight, or do we have to wait for?
We don't need to make a decision.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
On
Okay.
any of this, and we've been dealing with this issue since December. We've gone to the board. They've come back and told us, unfortunately, we won't be able to have a quorum for the 11 May when we would have done this in the policy committee meeting. And so the recommendation for staff was to take the opportunity to discuss it with the planning commissioners now, and then when we meet on the 23rd, to discuss this with the board as an agenda and let them decide where we are if there's not a consensus. And once again, they may decide to say, nope, this is what we're going to do and go forward, because this is just an ordinance amendment that they've given us. But the intent was to make sure that all of the planning commissioners knew exactly where we were, and whether there was a consensus or not for it, it was the idea of being able to at least discuss that. So let me hear from Mr. O'Connor.
I would simply say that I'm fine with the 75-foot setback. You know, for the larger parcels that exist on Forge Road, you know, we're looking at 1 to 20 acres. So I don't really find a house sitting on 20 acres to be a visual blight. Even then, you know, a house on 3 acres, I don't know that that's necessarily a visual blight. You know, the speed on Forge Road is 50 miles an hour. So, you know, and that's on a good day. So most of the time folks are going a little bit faster than that, as my kids have found out with James City County Police. So, you know, it kind of goes back to some of my earlier comments this evening. You know, I am all for following our comp plan where we talk about preserving the rural lands. What I am not for is devaluing the lands of the folks who have ultimately decided their families have farmed the land longer than others. So we have now taken, if you own 200 acre, or 100 acres or 200 acres, we've actually we are now making it to the point where they can put less homes on their lot than if they own 25 acres. And to me, that's just inherently wrong. So to then take an additional 325 feet where, you know, without creating some sort of incentives or some bonus density to cluster it and put it back 400 feet or something. I mean, I just feel like we're continuing to take from the larger parcel holders without any recompense to them. And I just, you know, Rich is of the viewpoint, we're not denying a use, but we are, you know, and nobody's going to farm 300 feet in front of their house. It's just not realistic anymore, because that's the big lament that we have. And ultimately, my concern is that we're going to push these landowners into just wanting to put up solar farms and those types of things, because that's where they're going to get the most value for their dollar. So, you know, I think we're going to continue to see those applications come in. So, again, I did not approve our comp plan because I didn't feel there was adequate protections in there for some of these landholders out there. We talk about bonus densities and clustering and those types of things, but everything else that we're doing and every discussion we're having now, including net density, you know, we're starting to impact what we heard in that comp plan, which is we want more density we were comfortable with more density inside the PSA to have less density outside. And I just feel like we're losing it all the way around. So, and again, part of my rub is that, you know, we're taking away opportunities in a lot of these decisions for affordable, you know, or workforce type housing inside the community absent housing opportunity policy. So I know there was a lot, but at the end of the day, you know, 75 feet has worked on Forge Road for a number of years. It creates a challenge with Old Stage Road, and I think we're just using a big hammer for a trim nail problem.
Mr. Kraft?
If I, just two things to clarify. Number one, I want to go on line by saying that Tim and I have been in agreement right from the beginning that there needs to be some sort of a compensation mechanism in place for those landowners in the rural lands, and I'm very supportive of a rural cluster with a small density bonus and still the setback on the view shed. And so I've agreed with him on that particular issue right from the beginning. The only other thing, without getting into a he said, she said, I'd suggest that those members not on the policy committee, we need to get them those Photoshop pictures of Forge Road as it exists now, 75 feet, 200 feet, and 400-foot setbacks, and that to me is very telling. And my concern, the 75 feet has worked up to this point, but now we're seeing unusual pressures for residential construction, and I think that 75 feet is not going to hold any longer. We're going to get a constant pressure, but I would ask staff to make sure before the May 23rd meeting, and I'm sure that'll be part of the packet anyway, that those Photoshop pictures get sent to the rest of the Planning Commission.
I'd add to that you should also take a look at the properties that were affected both on Forge and Old Barnesville, which ones would be grandfathered. But when you look at the Barnesville one, you'll see that any kind of a 400-foot setback impacts them from the point of view that if the houses are destroyed and not built on that same footprint, then they have to take the 400-foot setback. And so there are quite a few homes that would be down the road that may not happen, but may not be able to build that home again. That's why I separated out the Barnesville from the Forge Road. The second point I wanted to make is when we started this thing in December, I sent a note out and said, because there were 3 other ordinances that we were going to be dealing with at the same time. And the one that I was putting together with this issue of the scenic route was the rural clustering for it. And so when we started asking for these elevation pictures, when you go back and take a look at the comp plan piece of this thing, you're really talking about the rural clusters being set back. And so I was concerned about, if you've ever driven up into Loudoun County on 15 and seen all those McMansions that are right up against in those rural areas, that we'd get that kind of a look. And so that's why we started looking at this 400, 200-foot expansion. But it still is open to me about the rural clustering piece and the impact that it would have on Forge Road. Obviously, I don't think it applies to the old stage road, but it does definitely, especially when you start talking about properties that are 200 acres, and I used one of those properties as the Lombardi property as an example and what that would look like. The real rub on that piece really came down to this compensation issue, because the fact that some other people may farm it or put wineries in it like they do up in Loudoun County, I don't know about that, but there isn't a compensation, and they're still stuck with only 20 homes if it's 200 acres, right? Or 10 homes if it's 200 acres, because you only get 20 acres. So that is the piece that really started me to say, really question, what are we trying to do, and apply it to both places. And I think after everything was done and said, I thought having another meeting to have the same discussion we're having here wasn't going to advance it, even though we've been back to the board already. So from my point of view, let the board make their decision, and there's some options that are out there for them. But we want to make sure that you're well informed and know what we're talking about before we end up in that meeting. Is that a pretty good synopsis of where we are, Tim?
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, I would just add, it was interesting. I took my daughter on a college trip recently to northern Illinois, and it is farmland. And the thing that was most striking to me is beyond the wind farms, because it was interesting to see the wind farms and still how much of the farmland was still usable around those wind farms. But all of these farms within, a 20-mile radius that we drove, all the farmhouses were near the road. It was really interesting to see that the farmhouses were near the road and the farms were to the rear. And, obviously it's large and expansive and flat, so but the vistas were still there, so again, it goes back to my piece that if it's one home to 20 acres or 5 acres or 3 acres, I mean, I still think it's expansive enough to allow people to see what's, behind it as part of the open vistas. So,
Any other discussion on this, or any other topics that we have that we'd like to discuss? Mr. Holland?
Change the subject.
Right.
Are we exhausted this one?
I think so.
Okay.
The horses stopped twitching.
Procedural question. Earlier this evening, I made a motion a little too quickly, I think, and kind of short-circuited discussion when it wasn't, when there was more discussion to be had. And I was on the receiving end of that about 5 years ago. So just to be clear, once a motion is made, is there to be no further discussion? Can you still?
You can do discussion on the motion, also consistent with Robert's rules. I don't know that historically we've done that on each and every motion. Certainly,
It's always, in my 6 years, it's always been there's a motion and right to the vote. But it is possible to continue a discussion after the motion is made, isn't it?
there can be discussion on the motion, yes.
Thank you.
There's lots of layers to that. There can be intervening motions and people deferring to alternatives to that. So yeah, there's lots of layers and options. Conventionally, historically, the commission hasn't used those very much, which is why they just come up pretty few and far between. But
I would hope if we find ourselves in circumstances like that you not be shy, Tim, and just, speak up.
Well, I just, you know, I mean, Jack's making it because of the comment I made, but I was really.
Well, I just wanted to be clear,
Yeah,
that's all,
no,
because I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and if I felt that strongly, I would have jumped in. I wanted the other applicants to know that my thoughts apply to the
Right.
prior application
Right.
as well. So it wasn't as if my comments were germane just to the one application. It's all these short-term rentals that we keep seeing that don't hit all these check marks that with our comp plan. So that's all. I appreciate it though.
Okay, any other items? If not, I will ask for a motion adjournment to our joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors on the 3rd of May at 1 PM. and-
23rd.
23rd of May at 1 PM, and I'm assuming it's right next door.
No, it's right in this room.
Oh, in this room?
Yes.
Well, how are you gonna do the seating?
Just like we did with the last one, the
Oh,
commission members
okay.
will be out.
On the
We'll
audience?
be in the cheap seats.
Cheap
and-
seats
Right.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion, please?
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.